Ask AJ. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Ask AJ, brought to you by Sykes. I'm AJ Hanna, and going to have a little bit of fun today. I'm with my friend and former Symphony colleague, now the global head of consulting, David Rombough. David, how are you?
I'm good, AJ. How are you today?
Doing really well. So David and I had an opportunity recently to draft an article for the newest Sykes Quarterly, which is all focused on digital transformation. And David and I wanted to share our perspectives on where opportunities lie. But David, if you could start, just tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I lead the consulting practice within Sykes Digital, and the purpose of the whole consulting team is, how do we enable the digital technologies within our clients? How do we sort of enable a different capability from those technologies and release something different? And my background, I come from a 30-year background as a partner with both EY and Accenture, and so the history has always been the application of technology to process, and that's not anything that's new in the past 30 years. We've been doing this for a long time. I think one of the things that you and I talked about in the past is, the lessons that we learned from, either the implementation of, big data analytics or large-scale ERP programs. A lot of what we learned then is applicable now, right? As we think about digital technologies, those things that worked well then, right? It's not about the technology. It's about how do we get people to do something different? How do we actually change the process rather than simply sort of, I'll say, trim at the edges of it? Those are the things that are going to drive, real value and different, what I would call a differentiated outcome for any business, right? So if I go back in time a long ways, had clients, in, let's say, old technologies, right, implementing ERP systems, and part of what they're trying to do around a finance system is they've got a complex entity with hundreds of entities that need to be consolidated for legal purposes. Well, there were ways you used to do that then. The abilities of an ERP system to allow you to roll up companies on a different basis, treat legal entities across geographies on a different basis, and affect that whole consolidation process actually allowed you to do different things from a legal construct and then a more tax-effective business construct. So you could actually leverage the technology to do something different because it allowed you to do something that you couldn't do on a manual basis before. Now you go forward to the digital world, and the question becomes, I can accelerate some old processes with what we've got, or we can actually take that technology and use it to take a step back. Okay, now what can I do differently here? So, long answer to your question of sort of background history, but the history is, how do we apply technology to make these things better and different?
Yeah, well, and certainly you and I have had a lot of time over the last almost 3 years now to kind of talk through some of these things, both with things that we've seen on site with clients that we're attempting to help in their digital journey, but also just in our experiences. And one of the things that you and I have talked about several times, and it seems like semantics, but I think starting off with this idea of what's really transformation and what's really just transition. You and I have talked about that a couple of times. As a matter of fact, I think we touched on that in a series of blogs that you and I did about scale in automation about a year ago or so. But it seems like it's a minute point, but really it's about a mindset. And I think that what we see oftentimes, people are transitioning. They're transitioning from one state to another. The transformation is really about changing what's being done, and I think that's where we start off running into some barriers with people trying to make any kind of transformation, but certainly digital transformations.
Well, and I think as it relates to sort of the long-term success of a program, right, or any initiative, there's nothing wrong with transition. There's nothing wrong with incremental improvement, right? We've had Six Sigma programs, continuous improvement programs that are all focused on, ongoing improvement at the margins of any of any process, and that's good. But if you're looking for something transformational and you're going to come back to your leadership team and say, I've got, an opportunity that is an 8-figure, or in some cases a 9-figure size, you're not going to get those through simply accelerating an existing process that you currently have, or making a transition from, I've got 4 people doing a reconciliation and I can automate 50% of that. You should go do that. There's nothing wrong with doing that.
Right.
That's not going to drive a transformational change.
Right.
If you're sitting in an insurance organization, I can certainly look at how I apply automation or digital technologies to a claims process, and simply take manual work that is repetitive and data intense and look at how I automate that. And we should absolutely be encouraging clients to do that, and there's value to be had there. Where you can start to think about transforming the process is saying, okay, what does the technology allow you to do that you've never done before? So if you start to decompose back to the sort of, go back to your SIPOC analysis, what are my suppliers and inputs? How do I think about those differently? Can I get data to drive the process differently? Can I crowdsource data? So if I'm currently getting data on a subscription basis to drive an underwriting or actuarial process. So I'm subscribing to data from various data sources, and I'm using that to drive an actuarial process. That's great. Could I actually crowdsource that data differently, where I no longer even need to incur the cost of these subscriptions and use that to drive a different actuarial process? Now I'm transforming the process completely, and I'm actually getting better data to drive a completely different actuarial outcome in that insurance process. That's different than just accelerating the claims. And that's a much harder thing for a client to think through, because it does go back to, I need to decompose the process and then be thoughtful about where I apply the technology within that process. And I think one of the issues we've seen in the last few years, and we've talked about, the pothole of quick wins, is there's a focus on, where the automation and some of the digital tech can drive quick wins, and that's good. As I said before, you should go do that. But if that's all you focus on, you risk having the patience to focus on the investments that can actually yield much bigger returns. Just because you get impatient with, I want a 12-month payback, I want a 6-month payback. And in some cases, I think, even going back to, I'm making a software choice before I even decided what I'm trying to achieve. Right now, we never saw 15 years ago or 10 years ago, no one would have said, I'm going to go buy Oracle and then hope that I get some benefit out of it. That never happened, because it's going to cost you 7-8 figures to go buy Oracle at a scale you need to implement it,
right?
Or SAP. Automation.
Yeah. And, it's so really what you're talking about is, and we've talked about managing expectations before, but you're talking about people having a transformational expectation when they're only engaged in transitionary activity, right?
Yep.
And again, it may seem like semantics, but that's why it's so important to really be able to narrow down to what it is you're really doing. But people throw that term transformation around, and it comes with this set of images and expectations and outcomes that people want. And then they end up really being involved only in transitionary activities. It's just taking what you're doing today and transitioning to another labor source, transitioning to another work location, transitioning to another technology, perhaps. But as we've talked about many times, that's transitionary, and you just made the point. It's okay to do transitionary stuff. It can be hard on an organization to constantly be stripping and rebuilding, right? You can take the transformational aspect too far. I think, I know, in my opinion, and I feel like you probably share this too, that there's not enough of that strip and rebuild done currently in a lot of what we see, and so much more focus on hoping that these transitionary activities are the silver bullet that everybody's been looking for to solve their business problems.